Hi, good evening, and welcome back, fellow travelers. We had a bit of a bummer when we started this live stream. Hopefully, this time it will work. You will hear on the intro there's a bit of a funny noise with me speaking to myself while I'm doing the whole thing. Things seems like things are working now. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I have a very special guest with me. He's at the intro, but I'm going to say it to you all. We have Gideon Joubert. Who in his previous life flew for a Mango, and he also used to drive a Boeing. And in his new life, he is a rootin' tootin' shootin' cowboy that is been flaunting his Roni all over the internet and making us all jealous. Guys, before we continue, I'd like to get all of you to go down into the description, click on his YouTube channel, Paratus. Gideon and them are doing a wonderful job for us on our rights as gun owners, and also support his channel because his wings is clipped. He also needs a bit of money to stay alive and stay in the air. Now, Gideon, before the stream, I realized that the stream wasn't running. Let's get straight to it. You said you were visiting about 40 countries, and you were talking about Peru. And tell us a little bit more about Peru, if you may.
Well, via Lima, via Sao Paulo, then back to Johannesburg, then back to Cape Town. So it's a more of an expedition. One of the things that I would do differently next time is I would actually spend more time in Lima itself, as opposed to just spending a day there. It's a very interesting city. It's a very beautiful city. It has a whole bunch of unique history to it, and it has a whole lot to offer you. If you're into, sort of culinary experiences and cuisine, it is pretty much a food capital in its own right. It's got a very interesting atmosphere. It has amazing coffee, and it has a lot of sights to see. So spend more time in Lima. You don't have to go straight to Cusco and stay to Agua Calientes, where Machu Picchu is and all that sort of stuff. You can take your time, really, and get to see other parts of the country.
Gideon, you mentioned more that you are more of a package tour guy. If you are picking a package tour, what will be the things that you would tell travelers to look out for? As you said earlier, pitfalls. What would be that fine writing, die fine script? What would you be saying, or what you suggest for people to look for?
The really cool thing is I actually haven't had a bad one yet, simply because I have a very competent travel agent. I always use the same person who kind of tailor makes the stuff to what our needs are. So I would tell her, listen, this is where we want to go. This is kind of what we want to see, but we don't really have all the insider info of everything. She would take that information and she would compile a package that sort of suits more or less what we want, and then interact with us. Okay, like, do you want to spend more time here? Do you want to cut a bit there? These are the type of tours that are offered. These are the strengths and weaknesses. So it really is up to you as a person to, ultimately, the best way to avoid a pitfall is to do research ahead of time and know what you're going. If you're going into anything blind, if you know very little to nothing about your destination and the customs there and how things work, you can probably get caught by treading in a few bear traps you otherwise would have avoided. And ultimately, avoiding these things aren't all that difficult. If you use a reputable travel agent to come up with these packages, they're probably not going to sort of send you to a fly-by-night weird, how can we put this, a tour operator or a tourist guide or a hotel that's suboptimal. I haven't had that kind of problem yet, but I can see how you can, and that would not be fun.
You know, Gideon, that is quite interesting that you say, and I've seen so many guys stepping into these pitfalls, because that's one thing we do as a family. We do our research prior to departing, and making sure and reading the reviews. As you said, you haven't had such a bad experience, and I'm actually so happy to hear that. And it's the first time in a very long time that I've heard somebody say you haven't had a bad experience. Now, as I said to you earlier before we started the stream, I'm going to ask you five sort of just a bit test your knowledge questions, and then we'll continue with talking about travel tips and the rest of the world. Gideon, the first airmail delivery was done in which country?
I'm going to go out on a limb because I don't know, but I would assume it would be the United States that got that one. Am I wrong?
You're totally wrong. Funny enough and very interesting, it was done on 18th of February 1911 in India, and it was a
In
flight
India.
in India by the UK Royal Mail. And it was a flight that was done for a charity, and they flew from Allahabad just across the Ganges River, and that was registered as the first paid airmail. The,
So it was a very short hop then, by the
it
sounds
was a
of
very, very short flight, but that was registered as and later on in that year, the officially first UK or the Royal Mail was done in September in the UK. That was the first email.
Okay, you legitimately got me there.
Gideon, traveling in Africa. You flew into Africa a lot, you as a pilot. Um, what experiences did you have in Africa, and especially, let's say, good country and bad country, that you can give our viewers tips on how to handle situations? Because in Africa, it's not a place for this. Sometimes we step into situations and we don't have the ammunition to get out of the situation.
Africa is such jeepers. It could be an entire like series of podcasts almost on its
Yeah,
own or
yeah,
streams on its own because it's it's such a dynamic environment and there are so many challenges and so many problems. The easiest African countries I've operated in and out of are obviously, the obvious ones. It's Lesotho, Botswana, Namibia, Zambia. They're all easy. Malawi's easy. Never had issues in any of those countries at all, ever. They were quite straightforward. Everyone speaks good English. Levels of education is quite high. There's a very low level of antagonism. Especially Malawi was great. Tanzania, Kenya, not bad. They're slightly more difficult because they do things a bit differently, but still friendly countries. Uganda as well. It got hairy for me wherever French is spoken. It became because now I've got a language barrier and I've got a cultural barrier. The DRC was awful, absolutely bloody awful, except in the south, Katanga province, that's Lubumbashi. Some of the listeners may be well
yeah,
acquainted with that. Things are considerably easier there, but you're still dealing with DRC problems. Angola's Angola. Mozambique is also, South Africans travel to Mozambique often. We know the challenges and the problems in
yeah.
Mozambique thoroughly. Gabon was, funnily enough, not too bad. And then you get the Arabic-speaking ones like Sudan, and Algeria, which also, Algeria is more Mediterranean country. It's much more Arabic than African,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's your issues are usually going to be language. If it's not language, it's cultural. If it's not cultural, there's elements of corruption and graft that you need to deal with. And then there's obviously the elements of criminality, political unrest, political instability. Malaria is a big one, yellow fever, hepatitis, get all your shots. Yeah, we can unpack a lot of stuff about what you need to do before you venture
You,
forth into Africa.
when you were going through that list of what all the diseases and what can go wrong, you're reminding me of a sketch that the two Ronnies did on Australia. I don't know if you've seen that sketch.
No, I haven't actually seen that sketch, no.
You should go and watch it. There's these two Ronnies, and they like these two Australians getting together, and everything that can go wrong, and then in the end it's like, come and visit us safe in Australia, that type of idea. Just like the two Ronnies could do it, you should watch that one. It's true. Gideon, if you could pick a country that you've been to that you would say this was a wow country that had an influence on your view, um, not just your personal view, but also maybe a bit of a political change of or how you look at things differently, maybe.
A place that really blew me away, and I mean, I'm not going to talk about America because we all know America. Like, if you go to America, you know what it's about, and especially the freedom-loving states of it.
Yeah.
But I was blown away by Croatia for the reason that, I mean, if you think about 1995, I think was the siege of Dubrovnik. And while we were all watching the Rugby World Cup in South Africa, the Balkans was falling apart and Yugoslavia was falling apart, and they were shooting the shit out of each other, for want of a better word, in Croatia. It was a messy, horrible conflict. Lots of people died. And not only did they bounce back from that into a productive, politically stable, competent country that's busy getting their show on the road, they also managed to reconcile with the people that were literally killing them a couple of years before. Well, they were doing some killing as well, but I mean, either way, I could perceive no bad blood in the spillover between the Croats and the Serbs and the Bosniaks and they had to physically point out to us that if you look at Dubrovnik, that some of the roof tiles are more orange than the other ones. And the reason that's the case is because those roofs were literally blown off by artillery and explosives and was shot to pieces, and those tiles were replaced. The original ones are much darker. And unless you know what the city went through, you'd have to go look for the scars. And in the space of 25 years, Croatia rebuilt itself from being completely war-torn into a modern economy, and they did a fantastic job of doing it. And just the way the people are, their friendliness, their spirit of national solidarity, how they're on the same mission, and how pro-freedom they are was just amazing to me.
That, as you say, that typical can do, will do attitude. Gideon, I found that same spirit in Vietnam. And it blew my mind. Of all the countries that I've been to, Vietnam was one of the countries that you could literally say it felt to me they woke up one morning and said, you know what? Yes, America and the Vietnam War blew our country to bits, but you know what? That's in the past. And how they, as you say, fixing the roof, that you literally have to go and look and search for that, for where that war was. I compare it to Hue, where we were, and I had to go in and do some shopping in Hue one day for us, as we were staying outside of Hue in Vietnam. And as I was walking, I was literally looking for the scars of the Vietnam War. Now, everybody who knows about the Vietnam War will know that Hue was literally flattened. Hue. We would spell it H-U-E-E. We would say Hue, but it's Hue. The Vietnamese way of saying it. And the only signs of battle is the citadel, the old palace, that they left in that condition. And, Gideon, that blows my mind. Now, you've touched the subject, and this comes to my second test your knowledge question. What was Pol Pot of Cambodia's most famous law that he enacted?
His most famous law.
Yes.
Jesus. He did a lot of stuff. I don't know if it's got to do with the one that if you've got a university degree that you had to go for re-education, or if it was.
That's the first. That was, yes, similar. You're touching on that one. That was sort of the how can I say, the aftermath of the law that he enacted.
Okay, so that was the aftermath.
Yeah.
I'm not going to guess this one, but
Gotcha.
I'd assume it would be something to it had something to do with if you're an educated individual, there's certain consequences for you being educated.
It was the time that he said, the year zero, that Cambodia has to go back to the
Yes.
year zero. It's known as by international as the year zero law. But you're quite right. That was when people of education, if even for wearing spectacles, you could go bloody to jail or being sent. One of the most craziest laws I think it was ever enacted in a country. And the devastation that it caused for Cambodia during Pol Pot's reign.
There was a fantastic film that was made about that, The Killing Fields.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, it was based on a true story
yeah.
to a very large degree.
And
Yeah.
I'm getting goosebumps here when I'm sitting because I don't know if you've been to Cambodia.
No, I haven't. I've actually never been to Cambodia.
Well,
It's on my to-do list. I've been to Thailand, which
no,
is
next door.
not remotely the same.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's next door.
As you said, the killing fields. There's. I still want to visit in Cambodia that field of bones, where they say that it looks like bones are growing out of the ground because of the look. There was a huge fighting between the Thai army and the Cambodian army when they went in to get rid of Pol Pot. And they're killing fields, and they found these fields where the bones would literally grow out of the soil. So many people that was killed. It's nothing compared. Everybody's thinking, oh, and don't get me wrong. Oh, for the love of me, don't go on the cancel culture here on my channel. Everybody thinks what happened in Germany during the Second World War was bad, but once you walk into Cambodia, you can get that feeling of exactly what happened. There's a magnitude of people that died. Now, I'm doing the talking and you're not talking. Sorry, Gideon. Gideon, your most horrible country or experience that you've had, and
You,
and a tip or two.
most horrible.
Yeah,
Sorry, no, go.
no,
Go.
and maybe a tip or two if we can, or should we avoid or should we not avoid it?
Okay, so my most horrible one is one that I think most people would avoid anyway because it's going to be a mission to get there, and you're going to have no point of going there. And it was Equatorial Guinea, and while I was based and working in Gabon, in Libreville, we did a lot of flights to Malabo and a lot of flights to Bata, and then even spent a little bit of time there. Now, what an absolute hellhole of totalitarianism. I've never seen such miserable people, so oppressed, so poor, with absolutely no hope of getting out, and a government so hell-bent on oppressing them. Then, in order to make it even worse, we were South Africans, and this was not all that long after Simon Mann and his bunch were intercepted in Zim from going on to commit an attempt to coup d'etat in Equatorial Guinea, which, to be frank, probably would have improved things there because it's difficult to imagine making it worse.
Yeah.
But yeah, Equatorial Guinea was bloody awful. I had a decent steak there. I remember that in a Spanish steakhouse because I think Equatorial Guinea is the only Spanish colony in Africa, if I recall correctly. The Spaniards had nothing else here.
Good grief.
And it's a tiny little place, but I mean it was awful, bloody awful. There's obviously a lot of mineral wealth. I think, especially the oil offshore at Malabo, and that's what keeps them rich and not them rich, keeps the rulers rich and the people poor. But yeah, don't bother going there. You're not missing anything.
Well, that's I don't think that will be one of my countries on my bucket list. Now, Gideon, tell me about the countries you just mentioned, Thailand. What other Asian countries have you been to?
It's basically been Thailand and Singapore. I've always wanted to do Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and never quite got that far yet. but I will try to do that because I find them. I find the cultures fascinating. I find the history behind the place is fascinating, and well, Indonesia as well, because my grandfather is from Indonesia. He was born there while it was still a Dutch colony, when it was still Dutch Indochina. But yeah, or the Dutch Indochina. So I'd like to go. That's on my to-do list. Not much to see necessarily, but
Quite interesting that you've just referred to Dutch Indochina. Very few people knows that countries like Malaysia had the word China behind it, and the connection that our forefathers thought that those countries were part of China, and they would call it, as you said, Dutch Indochina. And interesting enough, the only country that had its full name was Thailand. They
that's
never
it.
Siam.
Thailand.
Siam. It is actually
Yeah.
until today it's still known by the Thais as Siam, and but it was quite interesting. Indonesia, Malaysia, all of those countries had a British Indochina. Those things, and I don't know if you've noticed when you travel to these countries, the first thing that you find is the old buildings, is how big they are. It is
They are
humongous.
impressive. They're huge.
Yeah, and you know the reason why it is, Gideon, why the buildings was our
Um,
forefathers built these um, and actually, I think it was Roman that said it to me, that because they didn't have these huge amount of soldiers and guys that could just literally walk into the country, the first thing you do is you build a building that's 10 times the size that what they could build, and the wealth and impressiveness of this building will literally force people to become subdued and submit themselves. Because look at this guy, look at what he can build. And funny enough, if you see, look at in Asia, all those big old buildings, and it was there to our forefathers put it there to intimidate.
it makes a lot of sense though, because if you think about European culture, prior to the Reformation, now, depending upon what type of Christian you are, this is not meant offensively. This is just making a point.
Yeah,
If you adhere to the strict austerity of old school Calvinism,
yeah,
the concept of a church is a humble building where people gather in order to,
yeah,
exercise their faith.
yeah,
Catholicism and to a degree any derivative of Christianity that builds cathedrals.
yeah.
Now, a cathedral is a humongous construct, and it radiates power and wealth and importance,
Yes.
and it's an impressive building. So, a cathedral is definitely built with the purpose of impressing people. I think in many medieval towns and cities, it was by far the biggest, most beautiful, most impressive, most expensive building, rivaling the king's castle. In order to prove exactly that point, like we are big and we are potent, and it would be a good idea to be our friend
Yeah, it's actually
and
so
come
funny.
and come to mass on Sunday, please.
And then
Don't forget.
we'll give you a bit of bread and wine. Okay, now we're getting into dangerous territory here. I see Marika, our favorite girl from Tabazimbi, has joined us on the chat. Hello, Marika, and also
Hello,
I can't pronounce it. Eulythria. What? Huh?
Eleutheria
Ele-
or Eleutheria, sorry.
Eleutheria said it. Okay,
Eleutheria.
good grief. I must. That's my Afrikaans. Sorry, guys. Thanks, guys, for joining. Now, guys, just to give you a recap, I'm grilling Gideon with a few test his knowledge questions, and so far he's got 0 out of 2. Hopefully, okay, not really. He's
Yeah, I
got
got 0 out of 2.
half out of 2. Let's say half out of 2, and they still got 3 questions left. And while we're just talking a bit of nonsense about the things, you guys are also welcome to ask a few questions in the chat. Let's see if you guys can ask Gideon or me, directed at me or at Gideon. Let's see if you can, maybe you guys can get me into getting a 0 out of 2 for the questions. Now, Gideon, a bit easier question for you. Well, before we go on, what made the island of Iwo Jima famous?
Iwo Jima. Now, why? I know why this rings a bell, or rather, I have a vague idea why it rings a bell. But I mean, there was a Battle of Iwo Jima, obviously, but
Yes,
I mean, that
yes.
might not be the reason it's famous. It might have an entirely different reason. Um,
No,
no, apart from the World War II battle, no, I
you,
don't know.
you're quite right. There's a half a point for you. You're quite right. The Battle of Iwo Jima was very important. What made it famous was the American flag, the famous photo
Oh,
of the
yes,
soldiers.
yes. Because the Clint Eastwood movie, Letters from Iwo Jima, and he did the other
Yes,
one. He
yes,
did both from. He did a film from both sides.
yes. And interesting enough, when that scene from Iwo Jima, what made it so famous was the fact that during the World War II and after World War II, when they were selling the bonds, the American bonds, they would use that scene, and soldiers from who raised that flag, and they would literally do it during football matches, halftime. They would bring them up and literally do a mock-up of the raising of the flag in Iwo Jima. If I'm right, if I'm wrong on this fact, that's what I read on the internet. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I
Gideon,
think you're right.
yeah,
I vaguely think you're right.
yeah. Gideon, we've been talking about Asia, Singapore. What was the most, how can I say, striking thing about Singapore that you would say? Because for me, Singapore, when I got off the aircraft and I walked into that airport, it was like, wow, these guys are okay. They just designed it that you get lost in it still today. But okay, what was the striking
What
thing?
struck me was their efficiency. I mean, they make the Swiss look useless. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Um, Everything there works with a type of bizarre efficiency that I don't know if anyone else has replicated it. Maybe the Japanese and Koreans come close. They might, but I would be surprised if anyone can top the Singaporeans for just being horrendously efficient. And the way that their taxis work blew me away. I mean, you have a marshal who points you. You're in a little queue. Queue moves. Oh, also they plaster the entire terminal building with little "How am I doing?" like things that you have to push a button, smiley face, normal
Yeah.
face,
Yeah.
frowny one. They want you to rate everything they do, from cleaning toilets to cleaning windows to vacuuming the carpets. It's ridiculous. But in any event, they have the doodah, and he goes, "There's your taxi." Then you walk to your taxi, you get in. I mean, they take payment in cash, credit card, Zapper, Snapscan. I'm pretty sure they would take cryptocurrency. You tell them where you want to go. There's a map that comes up. It tells you how long it's going to take to get there, how much it's going to cost you to get there, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Who your driver is. This is their name, ID number, phone number. Then they start driving. Then if you take a cab back to the airport, as the taxi pulls in to the actual airport, they've got a thing that broadcasts to them and to tell them after they've dropped you off where they need to go to pick up the next passenger. And this was just a taxi service. And I go, this is a little bit extra. I like it. I think it's awesome. But this is such an Asian thing to do. I mean, Western countries, we can be efficient, but we draw the line at a point. Go, no, it's okay. We'll live with this. The wheels can come off a little bit.
Yeah, I think we've got so used to the wheels coming off and that they actually enjoy it while travel. When the wheels are off in Africa, I think that's why we fit in so easily in traveling in Africa. I see Talking Sirens and Kat and Ruth Rom is also on
Oh
them.
yeah.
They're getting I'm getting viewers on my channel. I'm going to celebrate tonight, guys. While you're online, please pop a question for me and Gideon, and we're doing a bit of not really travel tips. He did give a few travel tips in the beginning, but I think I'm sorting with just chatting. I've asked him a few
Yeah,
questions.
they were fairly useless travel tips.
Ugh, no. Any tip is a travel tip. You know what? The most useless tips that I've heard in my life was actually life saving. In the end, because somehow you remember them, and that sort of got me out of sticky situations a few times. So, guys, please hit a question for me or for Gideon, and let's see if we can answer that question. Now, Gideon, your fourth, not your final question, your fourth question. Name the three biggest lakes. Now you flew over them. You flew over them.
I'm, pre-
You're supposed to
I'm
know
pretty
your
sure I did.
the three biggest lakes in Africa.
Well, it's Lake Malawi, Lake Victoria, and then there's that one that's on the shore of between the DRC, Burundi, and Rwanda. That's bloody hell, I can't remember the name of the thing. It's not Lake Tanganyika, is
Oh,
it?
you're right.
Is it?
Yeah, you're right. Yes.
Is it? Okay.
Two out
No,
of
that took me
three.
back a bit.
Two out of three.
I I guess it's Victoria, Tanganyika,
Yeah,
and not Lake Malawi.
that's right. Three out of
Like I
three.
said, okay, there's
Yeah,
Lake
it's Lake
Malawi. All
Malawi.
right,
Yeah,
cool.
Victoria is the biggest, then Tanganyika, and then Lake Malawi, and then there's a little smaller lake called Lake Albert, named after Prince Albert, I presumed. All right, it
Not
seems.
Prince Albert the Prince, not the thing through his, you know what.
No, no, no,
Um,
not the bolt through your chap. No, not that one. You know what? I'm have to go afterwards and put this as an age restriction on this one tonight. Okay, let's see.
but here's a fun bit of information on that.
Well,
Since we've already age restricted you, do you know the
uh,
alleged, and you correct me, but do you know the reason why that existed?
no,
There was a reason for this.
no.
So Victorian era trousers,
Mm,
it was fashionable for them to be flat in the front.
yeah, yeah.
And the way that they solved this problem, allegedly for Prince Albert to wear these very flat, very fashionably flat trousers, is that certain parts of your anatomy need to be out the way in order to present the frontal facade. And this needed to be solved with metal bits and a weight to facilitate the flatness, allegedly. So, but if I'm getting this right or wrong, your comment section needs to hate on me. But I think that was the
I
story. So
don't.
it was for fashion.
I I don't even want to go and think for that one because damn no, that hurts. We've got a question here from Ruth.
It's
Sorry.
cool.
Ruth asks if it's true that Japanese eat live octopus. Uh, as far as I know, yes. But I'm
So I
not
was about
dead
to
sure.
say, as far as I know, yes. Well, Marika
Yeah,
is in the comments, and she
yeah,
can probably take that comment in
yeah.
horrendously
Google.
unfam-friendly directions.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Marika, Google that one for us, please. And then Kat asks, do you look left and right when you cross the road? Oh, good grief, Kat. That's not a travel question. Yes and no.
although I've nearly gotten run over because if the cars drive on the right and not on
Yeah.
the left, and you look in the wrong direction before crossing because you're used to your traffic and
Yeah.
not the other country's traffic, this can cause you problems. Um, yeah.
You know,
So
Gideon, the worst part for me is when I went to China and I was we came back from the restaurant at around about 8 9 o'clock, and I was just I was tired, but I was also sort of in this hype because this is my first time in China, and I started walking down the streets, and they've got these blinking scooters. They took those 125cc scooters and put an electric motor in it. You don't hear those things, and the next moment this thing goes beep beep behind me, and I'm like, I was nearly run over by a blinking scooter. And I'm looking at this and I started realizing all the scooters are electric, and you have to literally
you don't hear them.
you don't hear them, and if you hear and they are actually taxed. A petrol scooter in China is more taxed than a car. And I was like, wow.
That's an interesting way of engineering that solution.
Yeah. getting rid of anything that has a two-stroke engine or a smaller than a 200cc engine is more taxed more than a car's because they say the emissions from those vehicles, and there's more of them on the road than there are cars on the road.
Well, to be honest, I suppose China has got a few nuclear power plants, so they can, well, they do burn a lot of coal as well,
Yeah.
so they're not exactly, how should we call them, environmentally friendly energy generation. But
Yeah,
this is kind of why I'm I'm a big pro-nuclear guy. You know, apart from the Ukrainians who really wrecked it. Nuclear energy is the cleanest and safest form of mass energy generation I think we've ever seen.
yeah.
Yes, Fukushima happened, but also bear in mind, okay, this is a
Okay.
nuclear reactor that got hit by a humongous earthquake, and it was
And
still kind of okay.
and a
And
tsunami.
then it got hit by a bloody huge tsunami right
Yeah.
after. That's kind of a black swan, guys. Like that is
Yeah.
not normal in the world
Yeah.
of electricity generation. The Japanese have stacks of nuclear power plants,
Yeah.
as do the Americans and the Germans had, and the French.
Yeah. Quite interesting. My fifth and final question for you tonight was what happened in. My question is actually, in which country did a disaster happen on 26 April 1986, and what is that area known as? And you've just mentioned the country.
Just talked. We just talked
You
about.
just talked about
we just
it.
talked about
Yeah.
the Chernobyl
Yeah.
nuclear
Disaster.
meltdown
Yeah. Do you know?
disaster. So
Do you know anything about how it happened and why it happened?
I never look. I didn't watch the series, and I just want to answer Kat's question quickly about nuclear waste. There's a bit
Yeah.
of a Captain Planet mythology. What's left, the nuclear waste that's left after after you've depleted a rod of uranium or whatever you want to call it, it's not exactly a big thing, and a lot of that is recyclable into other valuable components. So the amount of physical waste that you need to get rid of is small. It's expensive to properly get rid of it, but it can be done. And if you compare the amount of damage that's done to the environment by burning coal or gas,
Minute.
that's a small price to pay. Really, it's still a lot cheaper generating electricity like that, and than it is to and getting rid of it than burning coal. There was a hell of a lot went wrong in Chernobyl. It was typical Soviet. I mean, it's you just could call it communist incompetence and arrogance in how they operated their facility. What you're going to tell me?
Do you? But no, because there's, as you said, there's so many things on the internet. If you start googling Chernobyl, there was the story about the uranium enrichment that they tried to. Sorry, guys, I've got something in my nose. The story about they were trying to do uranium enrichment or testing enriched uranium inside a normal nuclear reactor. All of those type of stories that's going around. Then there's a group that says it's just plain common faulty readings on machines. Let me say, it's the Western guys are saying in what you've read is say no, they were testing and doing uranium enrichment, and then there's, let's say, the Eastern guys that says no, this is just faulty machinery and it led to a blowout. And that's for me is one of the most interesting things about Chernobyl is that nobody actually knows what happened and why it
And
happened.
nobody really wants to tell us. They don't want to declassify the required documentation.
Yeah.
By the sounds of it.
Yeah. And then you have this. Yeah.
No, sorry, you go.
No, and then you have Pripyat, the little town where everybody was just literally evacuated within a few days. The area sealed off, and interesting enough, if you take Chernobyl, and why I'm interested in this place, because this is one of my bucket list places I want to go and see. I want to go and see how the hell humans got it right to literally make an area bigger than the city of Johannesburg, literally unlivable for a few thousand years. The fact that the Swedes, there was a Swedish people who picked up on the uh, machines that there was excess of radioactive material in the air, and only when um, Europe and the countries around Europe started picking this up that the Russian government actually acknowledged that Chernobyl had a blowout. And it was initially accepted that it was at the beginning of May, and only years later that they found out that it actually happened on the 26th of April.
Yeah. So the reactor melted down. They didn't
Yeah.
tell a soul.
Yeah.
They tried covering it up and keeping it quiet. And
Yeah.
then when they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, but isn't that just typical Soviet style? I mean, it was just. I mean,
It
was
is.
this was around about when
Well.
Gorbachev was going with the whole glasnost and perestroika thing, where it was what openness and dialogue, I think, is what it meant.
Yeah.
So he was trying to cozy up to the West because. If I had to summarize the end of communism, America, and NATO just outspent them on defense spending, and they couldn't keep up, and they were obviously also ruined by the abortive war in Afghanistan that they couldn't win. Even at the end of the Soviet Union, did they still lie to the entire world because that's just what they did?
Yeah.
Well, they obfuscated stuff. It's like, listen, we're about to give all you guys cancer horribly.
Yeah.
And a bunch of other things. And we've essentially made, as you said, an area the size of the city of Johannesburg unfit for human habitation.
Yeah.
Sorry you caught us. We weren't going to tell you otherwise.
Yeah.
It's
know,
ridiculous.
Interesting enough, we've sort of veered off the topic of traveling, but this is much part and parcel of traveling, and a lot of people miss this. That I don't know about you, Gideon, but when I visit a country, the history of what happened, what shaped those people, what shaped their views. An interesting thing that very few people know. Eating dog, for instance, in Asia, for most of the part, Vietnamese didn't eat dog up until 1970. And
up until 1970. What?
Yeah.
Okay, now you're going to tell me what's changed.
That's the quite interesting war. During the Vietnamese War, because now you won't find Vietnamese eating dog in southern Vietnam. It's a taboo, basically. All right.
Okay.
In northern Vietnam.
So where the old South Vietnam was would be full.
Yes.
It wasn't communist.
Yes. In North Vietnam, it's quite normal to find dog meat on the menu. And the one reason was because due to the constant, they couldn't get food. And what happened is the North Vietnamese, I'm not going to use the term Viet Cong because Viet Cong is a very derogative term. So guys, if you're listening, don't use the term Viet Cong. It is a derogative term. North Vietnamese didn't have food because they had to pay the Chinese, quite interesting, for weapons and ammunition with rice. So eating dogs, apes, monkeys, snakes became a normal habit, and one of their most favorite foods to eat was Alsatian. And
That is an interesting and horrible story.
It is horrible, but that forced them to become used to eating dog. And a lot of people miss this, like we were talking about Ukraine, and as I said, it's on my bucket list. I think sometimes, I don't know about you, Gideon, but for me, that is important to know that history, You go to countries like Thailand and you ask them, when did this start? And someone will tell you it started in the 1800s. The British brought dogs, and it was just they were hungry and they started eating dog. And that is part, I think, sometimes what people miss when traveling. I don't know about you.
It's possible. It's also stuff about, I was looking at Russia today because it's a thing I'd like to do. I'd love to do the Trans-Siberian Railway from Moscow to Vladivostok. But you think, okay, Russia, and this is the one thing always got to me about when you talk about countries, is people think, ethnicities are all the same. Russia is actually not really filled with Russians. It has a lot of Russians. It's predominantly Russian. And then you're referring to more like the Cossack type population group. But
yeah,
they have a 10% of the Russian population are minority groups so numerous and diverse that there's like a whole Wikipedia page that you have to scroll through.
Mm,
And I mean, there's 150,000 of this, and there's 230,000 of those, and
mm.
they're all unique population groups with their own
Yeah.
languages and cultures, and they're spread all over Russia.
Oh.
Um, and Russia is not actually a country; it's actually a federation
Yeah.
of supposedly independent states
Yeah.
and stuff. And once you start getting into the nitty gritty of how complicated these individual countries and culture groups are, you go like,
Yeah.
okay, there's a lot more to this than I thought
Mm,
initially. You know,
mm,
you can't go there and just go, okay. It's a bit like Peru. You've got the if you are in Lima, it's very
mm,
Spanish.
mm,
If you go to Cusco, it's still very Inca,
mm.
and they cling, as is understandable, to their culture and their
Yeah.
old languages, and
Yeah.
they speak Spanish almost
Mm,
begrudgingly. And this is from things that happened hundreds of years
mm,
ago, but you can still see that some of them are far more. In
mm,
fact, probably 100%
mm,
Andean or from Incan
mm.
descent.
Yes.
They don't have a spot of Spanish blood in them.
Mm, mm.
Um, and it's interesting.
Gideon, I see we've got 8 minutes till Eskom is going to say bye bye to you guys. Uh, yeah, I see. Kat says Lima has a tech taxi driver. His name is Jesus. Well, it's not actually quite uncommon to have that name in meet the guys called Jesus in South America. In Brazil, I remember that one guy was to refer to as Jesus as well, and I wasn't like, okay, this is funny. Now, Mareka is asking, do you guys drink on international flights? Now, that's a question for you, Gideon. You, the pilot.
Well, well, see, I don't fly internationally unless I'm a passenger. So I do drink on international flights. It helps me get through the terror that is economy class, and it's almost as if the best economy class I've ever flown in was Singapore Airlines. They beat Emirates. They beat all of them. Singapore Airlines is my favorite airline.
Yeah, I must honestly say, well, between Lufthansa and Singapore Airlines, if I have to choose between the two, it's going to be very difficult. But in my rating, these are the two best currently. Um, I don't know. SAA is not going to get there, not very soon.
No, no, and BA is stands for bloody awful, and it's I think it's a reputation they kind of deserve. So
You are disking the airlines, and soon you'll have to go and beg for them for a job. So,
I've got a job with one. I've got the job with the best airline in South Africa, but they need to get back to full capacity before they can hire me. So we'll have to see how that goes.
I'm actually glad to hear that, Gideon, that you're on the list and you just need to wait for the call. I'm very glad to hear that. Gideon, on a last note, I've been taunting this idea with Ramon over the past weeks. I'm having an idea when lockdown ends and the borders open. And this is a thing that I've been doing, and I'm throwing it open in public. You can just say yes or no. Cheers, Kat. See you later. I want to do a run from Durban to Dar es Salaam, but a charity run. And with the economy now going into a nosedive, a lot of our orphanages are going to be in serious need of money. And one of
Yeah.
my ideas for the future is to do a charity run. And this has been part of me for many years, and I just never could get to the point where, or whether I ask people to do this with me, they like always have a story. Now, will you be willing to get into sort of a crazy idea of a few guys doing a run from Durban to Dar es Salaam as a charity run?
Dar es Salaam.
Yeah,
It
drive,
sounds like a
not
hell of an
fly,
interesting idea.
drive.
Yeah. We're just going to have to avoid Cabo Delgado because that's where ISIS is right
No,
now.
guys, at this stage, Mozambique, northern Mozambique will be out. This will be probably through Botswana, Zambia, Malawi. Yeah,
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think that would be an epic trip. That would be, and I've got the right car for it. So I would love to do it.
yeah. Look, now we just need to get that germ on as well. And I think, look, this is the idea. I'm throwing it out here in public and live, guys. and I hope that we can do that because I've just heard from guys that the orphanages are starting to struggle, financially bleeding, and I think in the future we'll have to start looking after them. Becoming more and more important. Gideon, it seems like our viewers are also leaving. It seems like we're boring. Travel isn't the thing for them. They want to hear about politics. Gideon, thank you for coming onto my channel. I appreciate it. My channel isn't a big channel as of yet, and I hope to grow. It would grow. And it's guys like you and and Germ and Chris and Ramon and everybody that's making my channel and helping me grow, and I appreciate it immensely. And I hope to have you back on the channel again. Maybe talk a bit more about different topics. This was a bit rough and tumble tonight, but I do appreciate it. And guys, before we go, please go into the description, click on the link for Paratus. Gideon is doing, and the guys at Paratus are doing a wonderful job for us on our rights as gun owners. I think with the threat of what's going on in South Africa, constantly being threatened to take our firearms away, please support them. If we don't have guys like Gideon out there, I think we would already don't have any firearms left. Please so go and support him. Also support his merch because the yellow mango went down the drain with the poo-poo as the same as with the rest of this government, in my personal opinion. Please support him. Keep him in the air until he gets proper wings and he can fly us around in South Africa.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the viewers. It was awesome being here, and I'll happily do this again. It's always fun.
Gideon, you can stay online. I'm just going to do the ending. Bye-bye, Marika. She's also here saying Eskom sucks. Yeah, we know. And goodbye and good night, everybody.
Fantasties. Bye-bye, julle. Bye, Marika. Bye.
Bye.